Today's episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity.
Welcome to episode 85 of the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. Thank you for being here, Connected Yoga Teachers. It means a lot because I know how many amazing podcast options you have and how busy life can be as a yoga teacher, along with all of the other things that you are juggling. I really appreciate that you've chosen to hang out here for a bit. And today I'm excited to share a conversation that I had with Amanda Kingsmith about hands-on assists. Amanda Kingsmith is a yoga teacher and the host of the M.B.OM podcast. If you're new here, hello and welcome, big welcome. I'm Shannon Crow, a mother of three, a yoga teacher, and a consultant and trainer for yoga teachers. Returning listeners, welcome back. You know that I get how isolating it can feel in this wilderness of yoga entrepreneurship. And that is why this podcast was created, just for you, so that every week between the classes, workshops, and trainings that you are teaching or attending, you get to connect to information, ideas, and a supportive community of other yoga teachers. Do you have a supportive community right now? As a yoga teacher, this can make all of the difference. If you are not already a member of the Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group, come over and join us. We have brand new yoga teachers that are in their very first yoga teacher training, and very experienced yoga teachers. You can find out more and join by going to theconnectedyogateacher.com and look for the join button on our homepage. Another way that you can connect with community is through our group program for yoga teachers. So this is brand new. If you've been listening in real time, then you know that I planned this out thanks to lots of you asking for it. And we have a couple of spots left in the next one. If you still want to sign up for that, you can go to theconnectedyogateacher.com/community. And if those times and dates don't work, still fill out the application form and we will let you know when the next one is running. If you're wondering what the group program is, it is a place where 6 yoga teachers can meet and share their challenges. I offer consultation time to each and every person within it. And we also do some online training time as well. So it is, I don't know of another program that runs like it. It's kind of like a hybrid between a mastermind and a group consultation call. If you have questions about it, feel free to reach out. It's a brand new thing, and so I am still getting the wording down, and I know that I'm just super excited. That starts in the middle of October, and I will keep you posted how it goes. Before I share this conversation with Amanda and I, let's hear from Jamie over at Schedulicity.
Hi, Connected Yoga Teachers. This is Jamie from Schedulicity with the hot tip of the week. Our marketing team was inspired to take a yoga class this week, and in the meeting that followed, we noticed that we all felt more energized, happy, and engaged. It's extraordinary how yoga can benefit and challenge people of all different types and fitness levels. At Schedulicity, we know that yoga teachers see a huge variety of students, and keeping track of their individual needs can be daunting. That's why we have included a place for notes on your clients' profiles. This way you can keep track of injuries, health concerns, or other challenges. You can also tag your clients with keywords. These keywords can be used with our email marketing feature to send messages to specific groups. Keeping track of your clients in this way can help you stay connected and mindful, as well as providing them with marketing content tailored specifically to their interests.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Also, some big news. I was talking to Michael of Schedulicity this week, and we realized that it's been a year since Schedulicity was the podcast sponsor, and it's gone by fast, and it's been a lot of fun. Some big news for those of you who use Schedulicity or have been thinking about it. The new calendar view is out. I'm so excited about it. Before, it was more of a list of classes, but now students will get to choose if they would rather see the calendar view. So if you are using Schedulicity, check that out. Let's meet Amanda Kingsmith. Amanda is a fellow Canadian yoga teacher. We met her way back here on the podcast in episode 34. That episode was called Embracing Your Yoga Business. Amanda mostly lives in Alberta, Canada, but she loves to travel around. She co-hosts a travel podcast with her boyfriend Ryan called World Wanderers. That podcast has been happening for 4 years now. Congratulations, Amanda. That's a long time for a podcast. Check it out if you're dreaming of travel or you just want to find out more about different places around the world. Amanda, like me, loves to talk business and yoga, and so she reached out and asked me to return to her M.B.OM podcast to talk about hands-on assists. And I wanted to share parts of that conversation with all of you because I think it was such a good chat where we really got into sharing our thoughts, questions, everything about should we be touching people in yoga class, and if we are, how should we be doing that? If you want to hear the full version of Amanda's podcast, I will link to it in the show notes. I've cut out some of the things and made some space to share a few other thoughts to go along with that. Before we get into the chat with Amanda and myself, here are those thoughts that I've had since we chatted. With regards to touch and really all yoga, I think it is so important for yoga teachers to have some sort of trauma training. This might be online or in person, or you could do what I did. I did an online course and then I did some time one-on-one mentorship training with someone who specifically works with trauma. Especially if you are a yoga teacher now, working with people, touching people, using hands-on assists, I think it is vital to really understand what a trauma trigger looks like, how to deal with that in a yoga class, understanding that everyone is dealing with some kind of trauma. And if you're wanting to know more, just an introduction to that, I'll share a link to the episode that we had with Margaret Howard so long ago. And that episode was very impactful. That's what actually made me decide to do a little more training with regards to trauma. Also a note that this is a conversation between Amanda and I, who have both been teaching for quite a while, who both have and have not used hands-on assists in different classes for various reasons, and sort of our take on it, and we really would welcome your take on it. So as you're listening, feel free to jump on over to the comments in the show notes, share there or in our Facebook group, or even via email to Amanda or I will pass it along to her if you send it to me. And last little note here, you might hear me mention my Art of Assist yoga teacher training that I used to teach when I'm talking with Amanda in this conversation. When Amanda and I talked a while back, I did get really excited about this topic again, and it made me wonder if I should teach this teacher training again. But I went back and worked on my niche work. So those of you who listen to the podcast know that this is something that I continue to do every year, and I especially do it when something like this comes up. So when I was thinking, should I work this into my calendar to teach this training again? Because I feel really passionate about it. And to be very honest, I realized that I need to stick with the few things that I really want to focus on right now. So it wasn't an easy decision. And I wanted to share this with you because I hear from so many of you in our consultation calls, in the Facebook group, talking to different teachers in the community. I hear you saying that you're wanting to do all the things and so many things. And it comes from such an amazing place of wanting to help, wanting to serve, wanting to offer things, and just wanting to feel excited about new and cool things. And I really understand this. I want you to know that I used to do more than I do now. I used to focus on more things. And sometimes, like right around the time of this interview, I have this desire to add more things in. And what I do in that moment is that I go back to this piece of paper. Some of you know this if you've done the niche course with me. It's my 5-year overall plan. Some of you might have heard me call it the airport test or the 4 areas of importance. And this is really the roadmap of where I'm going in the next 5 years. And nowhere on this list did I write that I wanted to be teaching Art of Assist. Instead, I have the podcasts, consultation calls with yoga teachers, prenatal, pelvic health, and the one-on-one and group classes that I do specific to pelvic health here in my community. So that's still a lot of things that are on that list. That's in my square of my purpose, my career, what I want to be working on and offering. But nowhere on there was teaching art of assist. So even though it comes in and it seems like a great idea, I need to look at my niche work. I need to not jump and add something else if it's not fitting with my plan. Those things that I listed off, the podcast, consultation calls, teacher training, and then teaching in my community, that's plenty to keep me busy. Every year, I do trim the list down. And when I do that, I become more focused. When I become more focused, then I generate more income. I feel less scattered. I just have a simpler schedule. I'm happier. So I want to offer out there that the niche work is not easy. This is me kind of explaining one example of niche work, but it makes such a difference. And I'm sharing also because if you are feeling pulled in many directions, you are not alone. Maybe there's a teacher training that you have your eye on, or maybe someone has approached you about a new job. Take some time and sit with it. I work with yoga teachers all the time who are feeling really spread thin and they're unable to settle in and do the focus work. This is when niche work is super important. If you're feeling spread thin, scattered, unable to focus and do the work in your yoga business, let's chat. There's both an online course and also I work one-on-one with people. So reach out to me if that's how you're feeling. And I will tell you honestly if I feel like the course is a good fit or if working one-on-one will help or if I can see something else there. So reach out in our Facebook group or through an email. I'd love to hear from you guys. Alrighty, let's dive in and listen into the conversation that Amanda Kingsmith and I had about hands-on assists.
I'm so excited to be chatting with you today because we've got a pretty cool topic, or I guess an interesting topic. We're going to be talking about adjustments or assists and kind of just conversing around it. And if anyone's listening and you don't know Shannon, she's the host of the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. She specializes in pelvic floor, yoga for pelvic floor stability. She runs a prenatal teacher training. She does lots of cool stuff. And we actually touched on all of that in an episode that came out on October 23rd, 2017. So if you want to learn more about Shannon, you can head on back into the podcast feed and learn about all of that. But this conversation kind of really got spurred from a prompt that I put in my private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. And it's a little bit non-business related, but it's something that I'm kind of curious about how other yoga teachers approach it because it's something that I've always felt a little bit uncertain about. And all I posted was, do you guys do adjustments? What's your sort of thoughts around it? And you chimed in, Shannon, amongst a couple of other people just saying this is a bit of a complicated subject and it's something that, your opinions change all the time and it's always evolving and learning and that sort of thing. So I think a good place to start would be sort of, if you can tell me a little bit about sort of your thoughts around adjustments or assists when it comes to being a yoga teacher.
Sure. I think that my love of assists came when I took my Thai yoga massage training and really got into how much touch could assist me and the people that I was working with. So that was like, ooh, I love this. And I want to do it all the time. And I want to offer assists all the time. And I want to bring this back to my community. And I just feel like I jumped in feet first and pulled a lot of that in. And then now it has evolved. So one kind of note on this is that I switched from calling hands-on assists, like sometimes people will call them adjustments, and I had done that in the past or had talked about it in that way, but I really switched to thinking of assists instead of adjustments. And I feel like that was working with a yoga school called Davidtree, and they kind of introduced this idea of assisting versus adjusting. And one of the questions was like, what in your household do you adjust? And so many people would say like my thermostat, and it kind of gives this idea of like fixing something or kind of controlling something.
Or like really changing something too. Like with the thermostat, it makes me think of like changing the temperature in your house. Like you're trying to actually change the environment.
Yeah, if I said to you like, Amanda, can you come over here and adjust this with me? I think that it gives a whole different thing if I said, can you assist me with this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels more like a team effort.
Yeah. And then I actually got into teaching an assist course. Now, it's not something that is like on the front burner at all in my world. People do ask for it sometimes, and I do love to offer it. But I found that when I taught it, that was when the real learning began, because we were working on something like child's pose, which is the most common assisted pose, I think, in the planet. And really seeing how an assist in that pose could potentially really hurt someone.
Right. Okay. So yeah, there's lots already. So like, I love that you've differentiated the wording. And one of the things that I found really incredible as I've dove more into my own teaching is how wording can be so key. Like it can just make people feel a different way. And it's so interesting how just even saying, I offer adjustments versus I offer hands-on assists can feel really different to somebody who might be like intimidated by somebody touching them because they might feel like, oh, they're touching me because I'm doing it wrong, versus them trying to help me get like deeper into the pose or really like feel something different within the body.
Oh, that is exactly it. And often when I start my class and I know that I'm going to offer assists, then I will let people know. Well, first of all, I say, here are the assist cards. We can get into that. And then I tell them I'm offering assists not at all to correct what you're doing, but instead to really enhance the pose or to communicate something that I am struggling to communicate verbally, or to give you a new understanding. And so that's kind of my intention of going in and assisting. And I like to let students know that so that they don't feel like, oh, my knee's in the wrong place, I'm doing this wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that resonates with me. I remember I used to not like having people touch me because I felt like I was doing it wrong. Like back when I first started practicing yoga. And then as I got deeper into my practice, I started recognizing more of the wording without actually knowing that it was the wording, being like, oh, okay, it's not because I'm doing this wrong. It's because somebody wants me to like really get into this posture in a different way, and that, they can help me. That's what they're here for, and not try to like, make me feel like I'm doing this wrong or that I'm dumb or something like that.
It's so true.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, starting even with something like child's pose and talking about how you can potentially injure somebody, that makes me think about one of the things that I struggle with is that if I don't teach the same people regularly, I don't know anything about their bodies, and I don't want to assume that I know anything about their bodies, so then I'm really hesitant to touch them. And it's, you think something like an adjustment in Shavasana or something in child's pose that seems like such a basic beginner pose would be okay, but it's, actually something where you can hurt somebody. Within that pose, like what is it about the assists in there that actually can hurt somebody's body?
So I think it's because this is easy to translate to any pose, so we'll just use child's pose as an example. So if my 19-year-old son comes into child's pose, if you can visualize, it's kind of a mix between table and child's pose. And we see that a lot in yoga students. Either they're not able to sit back onto the heels, or the head's not down, which is fine. Every pose is different, every body is different. But when we go in with the intention of like, I'm going to push that sacrum down so that person can sit on their heels, which I've seen many yoga teachers do. And quite frankly, I used to do that. So I think this is a really good place to have, to just like be gentle with self for a minute and just notice, if you're starting to shame, that's not what this is about. It's more so just an awareness, because every pose works this way, and every assist that we can bring a blanket or something underneath the sits bones, between the sits bones and the heel for that person, raise it up, maybe bring a bolster underneath the forehead, for sure change that pose until they find comfort. Like that's sort of our first line of assisting is that pose comfortable? Like my 19-year-old son would hate that. If he came to a yoga class, his hips are really tight. He doesn't do yoga, by the way, except when I ask him to. But then it's not a resting pose for him. So that's one thing. Child's pose is not a resting pose for everyone, not always comfortable. But then if my intention was to settle him in, I would prop him all up. And then, if I propped him up further than where he was going to go. So I guess the main rule here is you see where that end of range movement is for them. Like notice how far they can stretch. And our job as yoga teachers who are assisting is not to then stretch them further. That's where we end up with injury.
Right. That totally makes sense. And I think that, we're taught these poses like, oh, this shape in this body should look this certain way. Like we see it in like our anatomy textbooks and, in everything that we're kind of given in training. But then you get in front of these real people and you start seeing these things that look different. And I think that when you're a new yoga teacher, especially, it's like, oh, I'm seeing this thing for the first time in this body, but it's supposed to look this way. So I'm going to try and help them get into that, coming from a place of care. So again, not shaming. It's coming from a place of like, I want this person to have this great experience, but then not recognizing that maybe that's not even possible for them in their body, or that's hurting them, or it's not a good sensation, which can then be really challenging because you're trying to help them with that shape. So it makes me think that we always have to look at like, okay, sure, this is the shape, but it's not going to look the same in everyone's body.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. And another thing to watch for is because an assist is really hard to see what's actually happening. So there's the person who is assisting, then there's a student, and then maybe you're watching from the outside and this is why it's very hard to take a photo of an assist, because you can't be in both bodies that are involved in that, and you can't know the subtleties. So even the books that show us offering an assist, I think it's hard to not learn it in person. So another great example is a twist. So say you're in a simple seated twist and someone came along and just placed one hand on your shoulder, one hand on your back, and not that they're turning you, but they're just kind of letting you know where your body is in space. And maybe the focus is then on lengthening, like bringing length into the spine. So as soon as they do that, someone might be able to access that twist a little bit more. But what it looks like from the outside is, oh, they just twisted that person. But that's a really great assist. If you let go of that person, like if you were hands off, they would not then unwind. They would be able to hold it themselves. It's not like you're doing it for them.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to assist, the things you need to be thinking about are like, okay, so the shape might look different. So how can I bring this person to a place of comfort? Like making me think of the example of your son in child's pose. Like, okay, pushing on his sacrum is not going to bring a place of comfort because he doesn't have that accessibility. And my boyfriend's the exact same way, just for the record. And he's been a really fun example for me to practice assists on because his body's totally different from my, flexible, bendy body. It's like, wait, when I try to like assist you with this, like you don't really go anywhere. And he's like I can't go further, but it's really nice to just kind of have you like be able to put your hands there and like make me feel like I'm going a little bit further into it, even though it doesn't really look like much. And then again, you can pull away and there's, he's not popping out of it because I haven't forced his head down to his feet or anything like that. Not that that's even possible for him.
And you raised a really good point in that he said it feels really good to have your hands there. So there is benefit to it. Like this is the thing that is this push-pull. We're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to injure anyone, so I just won't touch anyone ever. Mm-hmm. And I feel sad then because some people love and crave touch, and we have less and less touch in society, and especially in our culture in North America. Like other cultures will have more touch than we do. But if you go in thinking, what is the intention of this pose? So for me, child's pose is a real time to lengthen the spine. So what if we just put one hand up near the shoulder blades and one hand near the sacrum, just to let that person know, here is the length of your spine. sort of thing. So it's even just hands placed on, or maybe they sweep out to the length of it without shoving them down into the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a really valuable thing to think of. And I love that you said that, it's interesting because I think of like Mexican culture versus like Japanese culture. And I think we're very much in the middle in like North America and Canada. Like Mexicans are always like, they give you a kiss on the cheek and it's always a hug. It's not a handshake. And in Japan, it's like very much the opposite. Like you don't touch a Japanese person unless you've been like permitted to touch them type thing. So it's always interesting around cultures and that sort of thing. But I think it's also important never to assume that it's okay to touch somebody because it's, this is our body and we have the right not to be touched. And you touched on this earlier, but what are some sort of practices, like as a yoga teacher, when you kind of start the class and you tell people I do hands-on assists, what are some ways to kind of engage the class to give them that option to, opt out of being touched?
I think hands down, it would be the consent cards of some kind. I mean, I used to make my own consent cards and they looked like kindergarten craft time, but one side had a stop sign and one side had a hand, like out of that foam stuff that you get at Staples. They were really very low budget. But then I invested in Molly Kitchen. She has some really pretty assist cards. And so they say yes, please, and no thanks. And I like that they say assists on it instead of adjustment, just because that's my wording. I feel like that in a group class, that's like the best because people can flip it over. They can say no. I usually always put it with the no side so that they don't have to visibly like reach out and then flip it over to no. So I let them know it's on no. I don't want you to feel like you have to be touched. And that's another thing that I see in the yoga world, that we kind of think, well, if we're more evolved humans, then we'll like hugging. And I don't think that's true.
Yeah. I mean,
love hugging.
Yeah, so do I. But it's like, and I also like know people who don't like being hugged. And it's kind of funny. I worked at Lululemon for a couple of years and it's very much like a warm, friendly culture. At least I think that the company in general kind of attracts those types of people. But the store I worked at was very much like everyone usually like hugged one another. And I worked with one girl and we were pretty good friends. And it was always like I'd force her to hug me, but it's because we had rapport and stuff. But she's like one of those people who she's not really super comfortable being touched a lot. And I can think of her as being like the type of person who would like to, maybe have the no up, but have the option to turn it to yes if she was feeling like, okay, I could use some assistance in this class. Do you just hand them out at the beginning of class then with like the no upwards, or do you put them out when people are kind of like in like a seated meditation at the beginning, or how do you go about doing that?
For people who, I don't assist when people are brand new to my class. And let me also say that often I will get them out in the beginning of class. Like I explain what it is in case someone doesn't know, maybe they're 5 classes in and with me and they don't know, or they haven't been there for a while, or I just assume that no one knows about the assist cards, but a lot of the time they do. And I will tell them like just as a reminder, and I go through the whole thing every time I pull them out. And I also tell them, just so you know, this also doesn't guarantee you an assist, because sometimes things happen in that class and everything goes out, like my plan kind of goes out the window because of what I'm seeing and teaching in the moment. And then I feel a little guilty if I don't tell them that at the beginning. They're expecting it.
Right. Yeah. There's nothing worse than like expecting a head massage in Shavasana and then the teacher doesn't get to you. You're like, oh, maybe tomorrow.
Yeah. And then also I like to let people know that like having it flipped over to the no will also mean that I'm not going to come over and like offer you props and bug you too much. I'm going to let you be in your own space. So I let them know that it could be that they just want to really be left alone, not touched, but also not have a lot of attention. Like maybe they just want to be in their own space over there. Mm-hmm. So my definition of assist is like starts not just with hands-on assists, but I think even things like the breath can really assist people. If we just walked by someone in a class and took a deep breath, we can cue the breath, but I feel like just breathing can be an assist. And then there's all of the other ones that we use and we probably don't think about. So Getting someone some props when you see that, their prop is way out of reach. That's assisting. Like, everyone grab your block, but it's really far away. I like to go around and get them. A visual demo is a form of an assist, like showing the class, like, okay, let me show you this part. It's easier. Like, sometimes for me, it's easier to show than to talk through all of the cues. Obviously, verbal cues is another way to assist. Mm-hmm. And then we get to the point where we're like, okay, I've done all of those things, or just for this moment, it's not going to work the same. So a great example of this is if I ask my students to engage their multifidus muscles, those deep ones in beside the spine, when they move into like a cobra or a sphinx or really, really tiny, just hovering above the floor locust, they can do it on their own for sure. And then if I go along the spine at the back, then they have such a different experience with that pose and knowing, and I can give them feedback like, I really feel these muscles working and these ones are on vacation.
Yeah.
So I think, and sometimes it's flipped around. So say if I'm working one-on-one with someone, they're trying to do rib cage breath, I'll get them to hold onto my rib cage and I'll do the breath. And then they can feel, the whole rib cage is expanding laterally and then going, like, closing in on the exhale. And they can feel that, and it makes them take a deeper breath, and it gives them a different access point.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. Before I want to touch on all those different ways that you can assist, because I love that you talked about how there's more than just hands-on assist. But before we go into that, so I love the idea of using the cards for permission. Do you recommend, or do you ever do in your classes, like, somebody in downward facing dog, eyes are closed, like, just, raise a leg if you don't want any hands-on assist today? Do you do anything like that, or recommend anything like that?
Yeah. And so sometimes I forget my cards, or I haven't pulled them all out. And then I'm like, oh goodness, it's just not going to work. So
much to think about.
So if people are often it's child's pose or downward dog, or their eyes are closed, where they're raising a hand if they don't want to be assisted. Is that what you mean? That one?
Yeah.
I think sometimes, because then they no longer have the ability to change their mind. That's the only downside. But say if we were like, oh, right, I wanted to do this thing and I want to know, is everyone okay? And I feel like that kind of tips over into maybe making that person feel a bit bad. I don't know. But we can't. This is the thing with hands-on assist. We're going to learn as we go, and we're never going to do everything perfectly. We're never going to give all perfect assist to all people and be able to give them exactly what they need in every moment, because we're in a group class. If you want to do that, then you have more one-on-one time with someone, and then you can modify for exactly what they want.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I know when I first started teaching, I remember being like, this is so overwhelming. Like, there's so much for me to think about. Like, I've got to watch everybody. I've got to cue everybody. I've got to walk around. I've got to demo, but not demo too much. Okay, that person's doing that wrong. Like, can we hold this here? Okay, I need to do this. Oh no, that person. Like, there's so much to think about. And I think just taking a breath and being easy on yourself, and just knowing that you can blend your hands-on stuff with getting that permission to touch somebody, and realizing if you forget to ask, make sure you ask before you're near them. And, there's so many ways to kind of go about it. And I think it's easy to get caught up in oh no, I'm doing this wrong, as opposed to just, doing your best with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And so I love that you touched on the different ways to do assists that are not just hands-on, because I think that, especially for me, I often think, okay, I didn't engage that much by touching people in this class. Hopefully they're okay with that. But I think that remembering that, the demonstrations are definitely a good form of assist, and verbal cues. There's I think there's a lot of people who argue that you should actually be able to teach a class without ever touching anybody, because you should be able to teach all of it just with your words. What are sort of your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say I'm not in that camp. But I have kind of visited that camp. So I have gone over to feel like I I need to do all verbal cues to be a more evolved yoga teacher, like less demos, less moving my body when I'm talking. That's when I know I'll be a really experienced teacher. But we have to remember that people learn in such different ways. So we have kinesthetic learners, visual learners. And so some people will get a concept through touch or a demo or a verbal cue. But if someone isn't great at the audio learning, they're not going to get our cue the same way, that verbal cue, as they would with a demo.
Right. Yeah, that's such an important thing to remember, for sure.
It is. It's like our students are all individuals and some things just don't work. Like when I'm working one-on-one with people, I can see this because I'll start cueing them into a pose and they're like, I don't know what you mean, because they're just going to say it. But someone in a group class is just going to look around at the next person in confusion, like hopefully follow along. But in that one-on-one, then I'm like, oh, here, let me show you. And then I'll do it. And then if they're still like, I don't know it, like, then I will say, is it okay if I touch you? So I always ask for permission because I don't have the cards when I work one-on-one with people.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. And I think, I think it's always important to ask. I was listening to the podcast episode that you did with, is it Amber Carnes? Is that who you say her name?
Yeah. She did a fantastic one. And she said, let's stop touching people.
Yeah. And I really love how she framed it around, and I think that touching classes can be really powerful. Like you were saying, there is like less and less touch because I think there's more and more stuff coming out where it's like, oh, I was touched in a way that I didn't feel comfortable, which is a reminder, instead of not touching, let's just make sure that we are getting permission to touch first and that we're respecting people's space and their bodies. But I like how she was talking about how like you never know about people. Like you don't know, I mean, maybe if you do know them, you do, but for the most part, it's like, we don't know our students. You don't know their past. You don't know what that touch is going to trigger. And I was like, that's so powerful. Like remembering that, even though we've been trained and we've been taught, it's always coming back to a place of like, I don't know this person or their background. And it's so important for me to respect their body as their space, as their entity, and to always get that permission before you do any sort of like touching of their space.
So the question in my mind right now, and maybe you have some thoughts on it, I'd be really curious. I know you're doing the interview, but I want to ask the question.
Yeah, of course.
Is I've heard some bubbling in the yoga world around scope of practice and touch. And this is starting to resonate with me. And I don't know where I stand on it yet, but it's kind of like, do you think that we need to be trained in massage and touch before we use hands-on assist with students?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I think, I don't have a solid answer on it, but it's something that I've also thought about because I'm not trained in that way. And I think for me as a teacher, one of the things that I do feel the most uncomfortable with is touching people's hands-on assist because I'm really, really afraid to hurt them. And it's not from coming from a place of not trusting myself. It's coming from a place of being like, I know nothing about your body, your past, anything. And I want this to be a good experience for you. And so then in my head, when I'm teaching a group class, there's already so much going on. I'm like, you're probably better off without me touching you. That's just kind of the conclusion that I come to. And I think that having a training where you learn like, okay, this is a really effective way to touch somebody, and this is a really great way to make somebody feel good in this pose, and this is a really safe way to do a hands-on assist. I think that would make me more confident personally, which makes me think that, if this is the way that I feel, I can't be alone. Like, I feel like we're never alone with these things. And so, yeah, I think that my conclusion just from saying that is that I think that we would benefit from that a lot. And I think that doing elements of training, whether it's massage or Thai massage, or maybe just something that's in a training, because I feel like, I don't know what every 200 hours like, because I've only taken one, but I felt like mine didn't have a big focus on assist because we were really focusing on like learning about the body and learning how to teach. And so then it was this piece of the puzzle that I felt like was missing for me when I went into teaching. I was like, I've got an idea of like, how other teachers do it and how I was kind of taught and how I think is right, but I don't want to like hurt this person, so I'm not going to like do anything that's too intense. So I think having that training would make you feel more confident, especially because you get to feel that stuff on your own body as well. So I'm not sure. Does that answer your question?
It does, but it also makes me feel like I'd be confident to go to your class, because I think if someone has that hesitancy, that will ensure someone's safety more than the teacher's just like, I know more than you about your body. Just so you know, I don't know any teachers like that. But if there was this teacher like, I give assists and I know more about your body than you do, where, as you said, the opposite of, you know, I don't know what's going on in this body, and so I don't want to hurt them. One thing that has always served me, I don't know who taught me this, is to go in when I go to assist, even if it's with a verbal cue. I think that we can put someone into a pose that isn't natural for their body. So if I go in to just say, what if you try it this way? Or I go in with the assumption of like, this person is already taking care of their body, and that's why they have this pose looking different than what I have in my mind. But I might, you know, it would have to be pretty extreme now, because I don't make shapes in my classes like I used to. It's more people are flowing in their own thing. But sometimes I feel like it's helpful if I go over and check in with someone. Like, oh, how does it feel if you do this? And the feedback I've gotten from people most of the time is that they're in that pose in that way for a reason, or then they notice. They're like, oh, yes, I see that my one foot is way over to the other side.
Yeah.
Didn't even notice that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's kind of identifying the sort of different situations, because I know that like sometimes if I'm doing something and I'm focusing really hard, you know, my hand's doing something crazy. And if a teacher just like gives a little correction with that, it's like, oh, okay, you know, now I can kind of have that like spatial awareness of this is where my hand needs to go while I'm having all these other like thoughts and working my body in a strong pose, versus like having an injury or something I'm compensating for, or a tightness where you're kind of shifting the pose. It makes me think of my boyfriend and I were going to these classes in Mexico City, and it was very much more of sort of like, I think like an Ashtanga background where the poses were coming from. So we did lots of warrior ones, which I find is a challenging pose in my body because I have tight hips, and it's even more challenging in my boyfriend's body. But he's done private lessons with, you know, yoga teachers. It's like he'll always ask me about things like that. And so he shortens his warrior one in his body, and the teacher kept being like, widen your stance, widen your stance. And he was getting kind of frustrated because he's like, I really can't widen my stance. Like if he widens his stance, it basically either becomes a warrior 2 or a crescent lunge. Like it's not warrior 1 anymore, because warrior 1's hard in his body. For me, I was like, man, you don't know anything about him. Like you don't know about his tightnesses. Like how can you just come over here and keep being like, widen your stance? Like he's clearly doing this for a reason.
Yeah. So just imagine if instead that teacher came over and said, does it feel like you could widen your stance? And then had a little conversation. Like I do realize in a group class, we're kind of busy, but then that would give your boyfriend that chance to say, actually, I can't, this is more comfortable for me. And then he wouldn't be wasting his time coming over there every 5 minutes, widen your stance.
Yeah. It was really funny. And I was just like sitting there being like, he walked away the one time I was like, don't widen your stance. Like not widen, like don't lengthen your stance. Like don't make it like longer. I was like, don't lengthen your stance. Because then it's just, it's compromising all these different types of things. And like, you know, I've also gone through with his body and been like the same thing. Like, can you have a longer stance? Because it is quite short because he's so tight, and he'll communicate like, oh, it's, you know, tight through the back of my legs when I do that. I can't keep my hips square. And it's like, okay, you know, just keep it where it is. It's a little bit wider and it's a little bit shorter than, you know, the average warrior 1. But I totally agree. There's a difference between do this and can you do this, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, well, that's such a good awareness, really. Like, it's such a good story to bring that point home.
Yeah,
sure.
I just remembered that as you were talking. I just remember being so annoyed. I was like, why are we doing this? Why is this happening? That's like yoga teacher life when you're like in somebody else's class. You're like trying not to be a teacher, but it's just like in your brain.
I know. I miss those days of like just going and being a student who had no idea of all the backstory of what's going on. it kind of makes me jealous of students.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you can't turn off that part of your brain once it's sort of active.
Yeah, because imagine that, like, even just this whole assist conversation is sitting in someone's brain when the next class that they go to, right? Is that teacher going to give assist? How are they going to bring it up? All the little details that we take in as yoga teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess bringing it back to, where we were going with the massage and that sort of thing. I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts around that? Do you feel like having a massage, like having Thai massage has been beneficial for you in your classes? Do you recommend that to your students? What are sort of your thoughts around that?
It's interesting. Definitely Thai yoga massage gave me a lot more to fall back on, sort of. And that's really what informed my assists that I would give, not only the ones that I was giving, but also my stance, like giving those assists, so that I'm not sort of bending over, hurting my back, trying to give an assist. So really looking at my own stances. But there is something to Thai yoga massage. Now, it depends who you study with. So you have interviewed Shai on your podcast, and I have as well. And he's not one of those teachers who will put someone to their absolute end range and then stretch more. He kind of has different mottos, like how slow can you go, and really therapeutic touch, and kind of really listening to that body and seeing where is it the end range, and then maybe even backing away from there a bit. But every massage training would be different. Every Thai massage training would be different. I have been looking at scope of practice a lot, and I feel really confident in certain things. Like, I don't talk about nutrition. That's not in my scope of practice. I'm not trained as a nutritionist or a dietitian, so that's out. I don't do therapy. I'm not trained as a therapist. So as soon as someone tells me, like, anything that tips beyond kind of yoga, basic yoga philosophy and breath and the nervous system, I'd be referring them to, I refer to this one psychotherapist in our area all the time, Diane Liska. But the touch is an interesting one. Mm-hmm. I don't know what my thoughts are on it. I feel like, sure, there's a valid point to saying maybe we need to be trained in touch before we are touching people. But I think that overall, I don't know, I guess I would have to hear from all kinds of yoga students who've had hands-on assists to see, are we doing more harm than good? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it is kind of like a complicated thing, because you bring up a great point that it's like, I was thinking of Shai too when we were talking about Thai massage, and it can be a lot about like who you train with and what their philosophies are around that. And I think that we should always kind of take from trainings what sits with us and what sits with us as teachers as we engage with our students. I guess the biggest thing that I'm kind of taking away from this is that, we really need to do our due diligence by asking for permission, first of all. I think that's the biggest thing, is asking if you can, put your hands on somebody. And I think that then, seeing how much you can do without putting your hands on people. Like, if somebody can make that, kind of assist themselves or adjust themselves with something that you said verbally. Like, if you say, like, if their, back hand is down, say in Warrior 2, and you say, gaze back and adjust your hand or something like that. And it gets them doing that. I think that that's a win in terms of assist, because you haven't had to like go into their space and disrupt their practice in any way. And they've been able to figure that out on their own, which is also really powerful as a student. So I think those are kind of the things that I'm taking away from this.
I was just going to say another option is to have like an assist specific class. And we often teachers in this area will run it that have taken my assist course. Then they'll do like restorative yoga with assists or gentle yoga with assists. And it's basically like 2 hours. The size of the class is really limited, and they just get like a lovely massage basically while they're doing yoga. Those people walk out blissed out, and they've signed up for it. Like, they know that's part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. At the studio here in Canmore, we do just occasionally, it always fills up really fast, and it's small as well, but it's 2 teachers who do like a restorative yoga nidra practice. And so during the restorative, one of them teaches and the other one goes around and assists, and she's actually a massage therapist as well. So she offers like really, really amazing assists during that part. And then she teaches the nidra, and they switch out and everyone gets like a head massage and a foot massage and that sort of thing. So that's like I've done it a couple times, and it's like you feel good after. And I totally understand, like from the perspective of a student and a teacher, like that's a really special case, right? Like you've got two teachers who are specialized, who have the time. It's like a capped group. Like I think there's only 8 people that come to that. So they can really give that attention versus if you're one teacher teaching 35 people, I mean, it's going to be like a lot of pressure if you try and give everyone a head massage in Shavasana, for sure.
Here you go. Here's your 2 seconds.
Yeah. And I've touched you. Little poke on the head. And I'm off. Do you ever recommend for people to actually have like assistants in class? Because I know that's what like a lot of, big teachers do at big events and stuff like that, is they'll actually bring in assistants to help them with that. Is that something you've ever done in any of your classes or workshops?
I've been asked to be that assistant, and I love being that person, like moving around. So I do this combination of where I kind of flow in and out of the practice with them. Like say if it's a part where I just can't, if they're really flowing, then it's harder to assist. And then once they get into something, I can move around. Like I just go off my mat and then assist as I go. And those people have said, wow. Those are mainly in teacher training though. And so they're also kind of signing up, like they know that they'll be assisted, and they say if they don't want to be at the beginning, or they have consent cards. I haven't had, maybe once or twice I've had people assist my class, but I think that's a great way, unless it would stress you out. Like unless you need to really work as a team.
Yeah.
If you're, like you have to kind of know where people are going to go, I just think of like, if you go to assist down dog and then they ask someone to lift their leg, you have to be very mindful
You're behind
of
them as they kick you. Yeah, absolutely. For sure. I love the idea of like, maybe if there's any newer yoga teachers who are listening, if you have like a buddy that you did teacher training with or a good yoga teacher friend, seeing if you can like assist some of their classes and they can assist some of yours. Because I think that's such a great way to get sort of that hands-on experience without having to worry about like, okay, we've been in this for like 12 breaths and we only did 5 on the other side because I've been doing this. And, there's just so much to think about on top of all of that. So that's a fun idea that just kind of came to mind as we're talking about that.
Yeah, for sure. Try assists on people. That's like the best way to learn. Lots of different bodies and people who will give you real feedback.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And again, like to go back to, there are so many other tools. Like one really sweet assist, and it does involve a bit of touch, is I like when someone wants blankets in Shavasana, just to like tuck the blanket under their feet. I love how that feels. It's really subtle. It doesn't take very long, and they just feel like, I'm cared for and tucked in now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a nice one.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It was an honor to be asked to be back on your podcast. I'm excited that your voice gets to come out to our listeners today on the podcast, because you have so many things that I went away thinking about, and I just love how we shared some laughs and we had some time to connect. And this is exactly what I'm really excited about with community. Is there's 2 ways that I could look at this. Amanda is a podcaster, a fellow yoga teacher, and she also works one-on-one with yoga teachers. And I could see her as competition, but she isn't. She's really my community. And I am so excited to be able to chat with her, to share the things that she's doing, to really pass things along to her that really fit her niche in the yoga world. And I feel really lucky that she feels the same way, because it can be a lonely thing, as you know, as a yoga teacher and also as a podcaster. I know Amanda sits with her microphone just like I do, putting the podcast together. And sometimes it's very isolating. So it's just nice to be able to connect. I would love to hear from you. Let's hear your thoughts on hands-on assists after today's conversation. Share your questions or your thoughts in the comments of the show notes or in our private Facebook group for yoga teachers, or like I said, email me and I will pass it on to Amanda as well. Do you offer hands-on assist right now in your yoga classes, or do you not? And do you make the choice not to? Do you think it is within our scope of practice as yoga teachers to be touching students, or do you feel like we need another training in massage to offer hands-on assists? I'm really curious about this. I feel like I don't have the answers. I just have more questions right now on that. Have you left a review yet? Huge thanks to Barb for sharing this testimonial on our Facebook page. Barb said, "Thank you, Shannon, for creating this group of support for yoga teachers. No matter what the conversation or topic, it resonates and promotes thought. You promote self-care and connection to self and community. I'm inspired by your guests, their achievements, and their willingness to collectively uplift others. I've learned so much from you and always feel supported. Thank you for your vision and your hard work to unite us. You rock." Well, you rock, Barb. Thank you for taking the time to write that. It's so exciting. Like I said, it can be isolating as a podcaster, but it's so exciting to hear that you feel supported, because that's the goal here. Is I have this idea that if I can support yoga teachers, then they can do more in their communities. And that's really the vision. So thanks for taking the time, Barb. Also, big thank you to our team, Laura, Samantha, and Suzanne. You make this podcast possible. Thank you, listener, for coming out and hanging out today. I am just about to start to pack up for a weekend away of yoga teacher training, spending some time with people who are very passionate and want to teach yoga for pelvic health. It is one of my favorite things to hang out with yoga teachers and see if I can offer tools and support in person. We have 20 hours together, and it's just one of the highlights that when I get to spend time with yoga teachers and really share and learn and practice, laugh and discover just amazing people. Okay, connected yoga teachers, have a great week. Stay connected to yourself, to your practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up.